Do not look at the screen right now. Just pretend it's not there.
What screen?
What screen? I'm a little frazzled this morning. So, if you haven't noticed by now, we are in the truth movement. But I think back to when I was a little girl and would watch cartoons like most of us on Saturday mornings, correct? I would see the commercials for Silly Putty. I always wanted some. But you know what my mother said each and every time? No. Did anybody else have that experience where you wanted Silly Putty? Raise your hands. Okay, keep your hands raised because I'm about to fulfill your childhood wish.
Why is Silly Putty?
Wheels? No, I'm not telling you now. You might going to have to share. Share. You're welcome. Anyone else? I guess you took it. Okay. I'm playing softball. Now, as you know, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So I need you to open them up, and I want you to play with them, and I want you to make a patty. Some people would be hamburger patty. Me, it would be a chocolate chip cookie. Now I want you to take that piece of Silly Putty, and I want you to hold it up to any of these lights. And I want you to tell me what you see. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It is though the Father allowed layer after layer after layer of Silly Putty to land on this earth. And right now, He is taking it off one layer at a time. After all, every day it's something new. Biblical Earth versus Bill Nye the Science Guy. Space versus holidays. Chemtrails versus no chemtrails. Everything is being exposed. It is though Luke 12:2 is being revealed to us every single day. So I have another question for you. If it'll play. Hit the return button. Why should gender confusion be any different?
Yeah.
So now I'd like to introduce you to somebody you've already met. The Vitruvian Man by Leonardo da Vinci. After all, he's been around 1,700 years. We were taught that he was an incredible painter and artist. He taught us how body proportions prove geometry. But did you know he was a probable Freemason? He expressed disgust of sex with women. He lived in Florence, the San Francisco of its day. And most importantly, he was accused of sodomy at least twice. Now let's take another look at this famous painting. What if I were to tell you it's actually two men in the act of sodomy? Two sets of legs, two sets of arms, right in front of us. And speaking of sodomites, that's my daughter on the right. And I think I don't have to tell you who is on the left. My daughter runs a company called Lesbians Who Tech. She has the largest gay community in the world. You may be wondering how this gray-haired, 60-year-old, white-bread woman ended up with a daughter in such an activity. Well, our road looked like everybody else's, as you probably read. Father-daughter dances, soccer games, lemonade stands, polywogs, muddy ponds and polywogs, but I knew we were a mess. We had been married in 1979, had 2 children, looked like everybody else, a boy and a girl, but we weren't. I knew we were a mess. But But I justified it because at least at the end of the highway, or excuse me, like at the end of the highway, we would look like everybody else. You see, I saw my daughter walking down the aisle towards her husband-to-be, beaming, as she walked arm in arm with my husband. I saw my son to my right, beaming as he watched his bride-to-be walk down the aisle towards him. I saw the look on my children's faces when they would come over and see that their children were playing with their favorite toys I had saved for decades in my grandma box. But then one day, we were shot off the highway. It didn't make a sound. It goes, anyway, by this email. It said, "Dear Mom, I have a girlfriend. In fact, I've had lots of girlfriends." I sat there staring at that email, wondering why my son was emailing me through my daughter's email address. And then it hit me. This is bad. We were now in a desolate land. No living trees, no churches, no life really. Only women wearing Birkenstocks. But we were at least in therapy, and we were going to do better. But I wanted something deeper. Because you see, I knew three things. I knew the proverbial, you just got to pray about it, advice wasn't enough. I knew this had a lot to do with me. There was always a block between me and my daughter. And I knew specifically we were going to have to work hard at this. It wasn't going to go away overnight. I'm going to stay on that one. So we had deliverances done. Nothing really happened afterwards, except for I met this amazing woman during my husband's deliverance. We became good friends. About 6 months into our friendship, she asked me a very life-changing and important question. She simply asked, "Do you have any Freemasons in your background?" And I went, "Not that I know of," which pretty much means probably. So she sent me to this prayer online, and I read it. It was against the Freemasons. It took about a half hour. I felt lighter, and pretty soon the memories started coming up. One of which I was 7 years old, and the friend of the family, Ralph Murray, came into my bedroom, and he wrote me. I started hiding my wet sheets in the toy box. And as devastating as that was, at least it explained that. And at least it wasn't my dad, I told myself. That is until my second memory came up. My father came into my bedroom when I was 4 years old, and he orally raped me. And as devastating as that was, at least it explained a lot, like why I woke up at 4 years old and I could not move, I could not speak, I could not scream. My mother rushed me to the hospital, and of course they found nothing wrong with me, but still gave me pills or medicines. Again, as devastating as that was, and it explained a lot, at least it wasn't satanic ritual abuse. Until I saw my father's hand pulling on the emergency brake on our 1956 Chevy. I looked down in this new memory, and there were my feet stuffed in white lace trimmed socks and black patent leather Mary Jane shoes. I looked over the dashboard of, by the way, the coolest car ever made, the 56 Chevy, and I looked at the parking lot, or excuse me, the Freemason building via the parking lot view. My dad and I walked hand in hand into that building. He put me on the altar. And to this day, I'm not exactly specific what he did or what they did. But all I know is it did definitely explain a lot. So our family was getting along better during this time. Our kids lived in San Francisco, even in the same apartment for 18 months. We would visit each other on holidays, and Mother's Day was not like any other. We went up there and we had it, actually it was probably one of the best times we've had as the four of us. But as my son walked away that Monday morning as we had breakfast, I felt the Lord impress on me that this was going to be the last time I see him. And so yes, it was our last time together. Our son was found dead in his bed September 7th, 2010 by my daughter. He died of cardiomyopathy, enlarged heart, but still it was devastating. But I knew three things. One, I was going to allow myself to breathe this time. I was not going to listen to those Christianese sayings that say, within 12 hours I had somebody calling me and say, "You know he's in heaven, right?" Thank you for sharing. I wasn't going to listen to them. I was going to allow myself to grieve. Two, I wanted to be in my own personal grounding for health, healing and health, because by that point I had already been sick for 10 years with chronic fatigue. And 3, the most important thing truthfully was, our middleman was gone. Tim solved everything. He was the go-to kid. He didn't talk a lot, but when he did, you should listen. He was no longer going to save us all. We were going to have to deal as he flew away. In the meantime, our daughter got engaged to her partner, but I didn't have to worry about it because I wasn't going to go. After all, it's a sinful event. I am done with this. But then I learned it was on Mother's Day weekend. I was going to have to give up Mother's Day. It was hard enough without or before Tim died. My husband would take me anywhere I wanted to go. But going into restaurants and getting stuffed in a 2-top because you couldn't get a 4-top because of all the familias, same from San Diego, familias, and children running around with balloons and presents was already hard enough. So I knew it was time to circle the wagons. There's supposed to be some horses. Anyway, so we joined support groups. I read books, watched videos. I had to at least be able to say no to this event based on still loving them versus the anger I felt inside. So my friend, the one that asked me about the Freemason, she shared with me about this man who used to be in gay himself, so I called him up. I cried for about an hour, and he listened to everything I said, and at the end he said, Emily, you have to go. You have to be an ambassador for Christ. Then he said the words, that once he said these 5 words, love does not mean agreement, I knew there was a possibility that I could go. My heart started to soften. But it wasn't until another friend of mine was praying over me, and she asked me a very life-changing, important question. Have you forgiven your mother? You see, sexually abused children, and probably any abuse, we tend to be more angry at the one that didn't keep us safe than the actual perpetrator. So I said, you mean Phyllis? And she said, I think we have to work on that. So 5 minutes before I forgave my mother, I could not go to that wedding. 5 minutes after, I knew I could go. So I texted her, and she said, wow, what's a change of heart? And I said, well, love does not mean agreement. And so we got flights, I can't think of the word, and we were ready to go until about 3 weeks later, we got this text. The wedding was canceled.
Wow.
I was quite excited and sure that she had just come back, and we were going to have at least a family of 3, but no, not yet. But the bad news was I had all this desire to be with lesbians. Well, what do you do unless you go to Hillcrest in San Diego where we live and hang out at the Whole Foods? But I figured that would probably get short-lived. That's where I had my prom. It's Hotel Del Coronado. It's another story. Anyway, but then I remembered my daughter started putting on this little seminar. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Now, see? There we go. Yes.
Wow.
Welcome to Lesbian to Tech.
It is now, well, it's in San Francisco and LA's, or excuse me, San Francisco and New York, as I'll explain in a minute, but it is huge. Absolutely huge. There, my husband and I are with 350 self-proclaimed queer women, and we had a blast. I loved finding ways to love in these women. I would put the name tags in the lamplier and pray over them. I even got to pray with one woman at one point, make friends in the line for the restroom. I took it on as a ministry. This is where it started, at the Casters Theater in San Francisco. She's done 3 seminars for homosexuality and technology at the White House during the Obama administration. She, as you saw, interviewed Hillary Clinton. Her partner, by the way, worked for Gabby Gifford during her shooting. She was the press agent, and as most of you know, is married to Mark Kelly. So it's been some interesting conversations, to say the least. But in her latest article, she was on the cover of a magazine and said, can this woman save 150 of these companies regarding diversity? She's an icon. She's an absolute icon. I don't see this, yes, it's a problem, obviously, but I don't see this so much as a problem as a possible and probable platform. And then there was a time I wrote a book, and these pictures in the middle have absolutely no bearing on my speech, but other than to show you my handsome son and my beautiful daughter. This is the one in the blue. Oh, it's kind of blurry. It's taken a few days before he died. Her little dog's paw got caught in the escalator, and that's why there's pink things on her. Those are bandages, yeah. So then at one of the seminars, in 2015, the keynote speaker started to speak. And I knew the woman on the left because Leanne basically got her job at the White House, the czar of technology during the Obama years. But I wasn't sure about the two on the right. But what was interesting is the woman on the right kept grabbing the microphone from Megan Smith, who's a big deal. And she was hilarious. We were all on the edge of our seats as we listened to all her stories about being at IBM during the 60s. She was probably the first woman to have a PC on her desk. So this is a big deal for these gals because it's all about technology as well. And then she shared that how hard it was for her and her partner, that she couldn't talk about her partner at work. And my backside slid about halfway into the chair. And I told myself, okay, Emily, you're not at Women Who Tech, you are at Lesbians Who Tech. You need to get over it. Well, then that picture that you see there flashed on the screen, and I realized this was the woman that made gay marriage legal months prior at the Supreme Court. So by this time, my backside is firmly planted on that chair, and I'm thinking, I need to get the heck out of Sodom and Gomorrah now. But God said, no. I said, I know. My book had just come out, and I had several copies in my backpack. I said, I know we're supposed to trade books. And he went, no. I said, okay. Then a year later, she was back in New York. She'd actually gone to San Francisco as well, but she was in New York this time. And my husband went up and met her. I followed his lead, and I went up and introduced myself to Edie Windsor. She grabbed my hands, and she said, your daughter made me cry when she named a scholarship program after me. And thank you so much for raising your daughter in such a way that she does these seminars. And I said, you have no idea. And then her partner now, they got engaged. But I could not go. It was in Berlin, and I cannot be around cigarette smoke. So I stayed home. And there I watched this wedding unfold on Instagram. It was disheartening to say the least, still dealing with health issues. And the emotions of seeing Gabby Gifford and Mark Kelly getting to be at this event, and not me, was quite upsetting. So I said something on Instagram I should not have said. I didn't think they could see it, but guess what they did? And they could not wait to tell her. At this point, she does not speak to me. But it's not the end of anybody's highway into God says it is. You see, training up a child is important. When a child is born, they need to bond with the mother. Naturally, we have the milk. This is just what happens. But then when the little boy is about 1.5 to 2.5 years old, he starts to need to search out for his dad. Why? Simple. He needs to learn how to be a man, a husband, and a father. A little girl stays with the mom, and she needs to learn how to be a woman, a wife, and a mother. And when these events do not take place, this child is left with a hole in their heart. And so if there may be other factors, and not just this one, because it doesn't happen every time, but it is a huge factor. They have sex with the same-sex person, they feel whole for the first time in their lives. This puzzle piece just landed. It's a black puzzle piece, yet it's still a puzzle piece. I ran into a woman when I was just learning that even if a little girl's in the incubator, ICU, for just a short amount of time, I guess that'd be incubator, she can still have lesbian desires, even if the mother and child go on to a wonderful relationship. So I was telling this to this gal who's taking me home via a free car or shuttle car ride from a car dealership. And she said, really? And I thought, oh, I've told this to a liberal and we're going to be in trouble. She said, no. She said, I have struggled with same-sex desires my whole adult life. I'll go into them, and then I get convicted, and I repent, and I leave, and then I went back in. She said, I was in the incubator for a few hours. And here we see, I just birthed my daughter, but unfortunately they gave me Pitocin and Demerol, and I basically handed her to my husband, whom she bonded with. My son, 18 months later, different story, no drugs, birthing room, nursed him on the table. Rejection is a huge issue with gays, gender confused, whatever you want to call them. You see, when we're rejected, the enemy comes in. That means literally demons come in. And they start to tell us what is the truth. And as children, obviously, we're not going to be able to decipher between God and the demons, right? This is huge, and it's only going to get worse before it gets better, because probably the people that rejected you are still your parents. My mother couldn't hold me from spinal metaphyseal and meningocele. She didn't nurse me. But that's not going to matter to a 6-month-old that is reaching out to be heard. We're as sick as our secrets. Sexual abuse. We're supposed to go from A to B, B to C, C to D, etc. And when that's interrupted, what happens is a definite stifling of our development. When I was a kid, the joke was, don't give a kid coffee, it'll stunt their growth. We should have been saying, don't sexually abuse your child, it will stunt their growth. Because they're not able to move on unless the father steps in. These are just some of the symptoms of sexual abuse. As I mentioned, I wet the bed at 7 years old. I started sucking my thumb at age 4 for no reason. My mother even said something like, why is she all of a sudden sucking her thumb? Sorry to get graphic, but it's the truth. There was a little boy in our neighborhood that would defecate in people's lawns. Poor little guy. And the mother said, well, the last 2 inches of his rectum don't work. Hello.
Yeah.
And now, could it have been a father? I don't know. We also had a doctor in the neighborhood with about 17 full albums of pictures of children he had sexually abused.
Wow.
Thankfully, I didn't like the receptionist. So my kids didn't go, in other words. So I used to just kind of go past this slide, not gonna lie, because I had heard that demons can enter when this does not happen. Wives, submit to your own husbands as the Lord. But what really happens is, when this doesn't go right, is double-mindedness. But now we know why. What we see here, we see all the time, right? The mothers taking the children to church, right? Because you have to. This is what we're really seeing. Jezebel and Ahab. Men are supposed to be the spiritual leaders. And when the women are almost forced to do this, we are creating a Jezebel spirit. We start to learn more, we start to tell our husbands what for about scripture, and we're teaching them, etc., etc. This does not work for us. Living proof. Living proof. I'd like to show you probably the most famous Jezebel and how this all starts, or can start. See, if I do it too much, then I always feel like my son when they're playing Nintendo. I'm really pushing the button. You see what happens when we're mostly children. We get abused and we make oaths. Some girls will say, I will never date men, I will never be with men. I know of one that says, I will never be dependent on a man. And so she's still in control of the marriage. All sorts of different oaths can be made when we're desperate. These oaths, as you heard her, she acknowledges there's a God. She makes this oath to God. But she promises to lie, steal. Who does that sound like? Satan, who comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And she added murder, I guess destroy means murder. That's a spirit of Jezebel. She killed 450 prophets. And how does this take place, you wonder? Well, remember how God puts a spirit of like Elijah on one of his prophets? Like an instant download. Let's just get her done. Satan does the same thing, only with his people. And so then we get the spirit of Ahab. And I'm going to do men and women. Jezebel can be in a man and vice versa. But for teaching today, I'm going to just do that. But because at the end of the day, what this is gender confusion. The men aren't stepping up. We've pushed them down, and the Jezebels are taking over. And who did Jezebel, or Scarlet really love? This always creeped me out, but now I understand it.
Well, I can never make you understand because you don't know the meaning of fear.
Ashley.
You never mind facing reality.
You face reality. I don't. I'm too scared. Jezebels love to find weak men because they control them. It may not be something they do subconsciously, but it tends to be there with these spirits. And I'm not advocating maybe all of this guy's actions, but look who Scarlet really responded to.
You have no honor, have we?
Thanks, Molly.
It's not that easy, Scarlet. Turn me out while you chase Ashley Wilkes, while you dream of Ashley Wilkes. One night you're not turning me out.
I'm not saying this is totally perfect, but it's a good illustration. And the famous scene. She's all happy. So, again, not saying that, but it shows that really what she needed was a man to take charge. This is an excellent illustration. It's only a minute. It's just precious. Hopefully you can hear it. He's whining. He says, I never know what she wants. And he's saying she needs a man. She doesn't need a boy, she needs a man. And magically, he turns into one. And she's stomping around just like a Jezebel. Oh. He proves to her, though, he is capable. He says, I know more about first aid than you know about baseball cards, because she's very into baseball cards. He has permission to tear her clothing. He says they're ruined right. So tears them then. And he aids her. He helps her. He protects her. And then he's gentle. That's just an amazing illustration. I can't tell you how many times I've heard my husband say, I don't know what I'm supposed to say. Because they don't know a lot of times because, anyway. So these are generational curses as well. You don't necessarily have to be abused. And by the way, Scarlett O'Hara, no, she wasn't abused, she was spoiled. Her dad never said no. I have learned that the only effective discipline comes from the dad. When I was growing up, there was always this saying, wait till your father gets home. And then women started taking charge of the discipline, and it doesn't work. Now, we can enforce their rules, but they still need to be the head of that. So my grandmothers, I'm sure, were probably had that Jezebel spirit, especially Olga on the bottom right. She was quite a tough lady, and definitely my grandfather was an Ahab. And by the way, they say, and I think it could be true, you can't have a Jezebel without an Ahab. Because if the Ahabs were the spiritual leader of the home and knock it off and we're going to get rid of the spirit, it wouldn't be taking place as it is today. Now we're going to go into history of homosexuality. Many say that it started with Moloch, because right after they talked about Moloch, it gives the warning for men should not lie with mankind, etc. You see, during these, it wasn't just child sacrifice, if that wasn't enough. There was orgies going on during these ceremonies, these rituals. And most of the activities were sodomy. But I'm sure Moloch isn't around now, right? Well, here we have Moloch handing children, but there's nothing new under the sun. I also think that means nothing's gone away. I think Satan has just gotten smarter. So here we have Moloch being handed children onto his lap from the parents. And being handed into the fire. Ever seen children scream and cry before they get on Santa's lap? That's me, with my dad. That's me a year prior. I wasn't quite screaming, but I definitely wasn't happy looking for my mom and dad like, who the heck is this guy? This is a wonderful man, Ryan Sorba. He has done extensive research on the whole gay lifestyle in many different directions. A public speaker. He's also an author. He wrote the book, The Born Gay Hoax. Good news, you can download it for free, 95-page PDF file. It's on my Facebook page as well. But he's stating that sodomy basically started with Noah and Ham. Ham either has sex with his mother, some say, sex with Noah. At the very least, he didn't uncover, or he allowed Noah to be uncovered, so he was cursed. And by the second generation, Ham's grandson was Nimrod, who married Ishtar, and they were pagan worshippers. In more modern times, there was a man named Karl Heinrich Ulrich in Berlin, probably Berlin, but at least Germany. He was sexually abused when he was 14 by his writing instructor. He grew up to be a pedophile and gay himself, and he promoted the idea that the souls were just switched, and that's why there was homosexuality. And Ulrich coined the term Erning, male, and Dalling, female, to refer to members of the third gender, which was neither male or female, but a combination of the both. The term Uranian was introduced in 1862 as a new designation for same-sex gender sexuality in general. Side note, you get this one for free. If you've done research on the possibility that the planets are, in fact, really, really bad demons, there is the planet Uranus. Just saying, that's a free one. You got to research that one yourself, but I think it could be possible. Anyway, there was a Carolee Maria Kurtenberry coined the word homosexuality in 1869. Before that, it was sodomites, pederites, or nabin, and I can't pronounce it, but it basically means boy ravishers. This was the first attempt in modern times to make it seem that they were born that way. He was homogenizing it. And too much to list. Great video, great book. And when we were raising our children in San Diego, we would sit at the stand, I would stand with the other moms at the bus stops and comment how bad the world was getting. We were basically looking for a you're supposed to be able to hear it. Smoking gun. Little did we know it was 2 hours north of us. Mr. Disney was a 33rd degree Mason at the very least. He was most likely a pedophile. He promoted magic, sorcery, murder, deception. Yeah, I could do 2 hours on this. One of the things I learned from the book Disney Bloodline, which is online as well for free, part 1 and part 2, is that Mr. Disney, there was tunnels. There's tunnels underneath Disneyland and Disney World. He would grab children, take them into the tunnels, sexually abuse them, and then put them on the teacup ride, because that pushes the memory away. It's an MK Ultra technique. It's actually NASA. And there's Mr. Disney. I don't know that those children specifically were abused, but wouldn't you be excited to get your children back from Walt Disney himself? And now they brag about it because it's so out in the open.
It all started with the short film Ferdinand the Bull in 1938. The 8-minute film was inspired by Monroe Leaf's The Story of Ferdinand. It told the story of a bull who didn't conform to the expectations of masculinity. All the other bulls wanted to fight, while Ferdinand just wanted to sit quietly under a tree to smell the flowers all day. Even when he grew up to be huge and was forced to fight in Madrid, he was too distracted by the scent of the flowers to do anything. The sweet bull also had long eyelashes and many other feminine characteristics, making him really different compared to the other masculine bulls. Disney won an Oscar for the Best Animated Short, so we can say that people really did appreciate queer characters at that time, even though they probably didn't even know what that word meant.
That movie was filmed at Hotel del Coronado, kind of ironic. But did you notice her voice? She's just so excited to share about this. We knew all along it was a good thing.
Disney still had the chance to sneak in a queer character in The Little Mermaid in 1989. Can you guess who it is? Some people said that Ursula was actually inspired by a drag queen called Divine. They made sure that the octopus was really born female in the film, but we still love to think that the character was inspired by one of the most fabulous women out there. Back to Disney's gay villain.
And the next one is the most twisted of them all. How many of you know Pan is a sexual god? Right? Peter Pan. What did Captain Hook have in his arsenal? Little boys. And when one would leave, he would simply grab his hook out and get another one. The next slide, I know that the word is spelled wrong, but it was a meme I got. I'll fix it later. I want to take you back to World War II. It was a time of trauma where women should have been strong and taking care of their children. Instead, they were sent to work. So now we didn't even have mothers in the home many times. The whole nation was traumatized. And what we do when we're traumatized, we run towards pleasure and we run away from pain. If your son came home from a box, you were told that, well, he died for his country. If your husband is down in the backyard looking up at the stars while smoking cigarettes for hours after hours after hours, we're told he did this for his country. This is going to have an effect on us, and there was nowhere to go. There was no services for PTSD at that time. We were just told to be a man. And what else came along to take the pain away? This is an atomic bomb. The Kinsey reports literally was an atomic bomb upon this land. This man, not even a professor, started doing research in 1938 funded by the Rockefellers. He had employees. They would all dress up every day in suits and bow ties so they would all look presentable. Only one had a beard. And he said that he was doing research. So you see here, it looks like that's a normal person. So when he comes out and says that everybody's doing it, everybody's having affairs, everybody's having abortions, a lot of these women that your neighbors are actually lesbians, you believe him because it looks palatable. Yeah, that's his secretary. He was actually researching it with, I think, Nazis, pedophiles, inmates. So of course the homosexuality rate, that's the one that coined the term that it's 10%, or the number. It's not 10%. So he also wanted to prove that it was okay, that well, the children love to have sex with adults. So what he would do was researching, how he'd do research was obviously have sex with children, and he would report on it. He would hook up little babies as young as 2 months old to electrodes to make them have orgasms, 25 in 24-hour period. They were convulsing, vomiting, screaming, and yet he continued to do his research. He even had his employees have sex with each other in order for the research. This wonderful woman, Judith Reisman, she's written books, she's done video, she's on YouTube, she's a great resource for all the things that he would do. Absolutely horrific. He would pay fathers and grandfathers to have sex with their daughters and grandchildren, and then record the orgasm when it happened. One daughter actually talks about it. She's a grown adult, obviously, by now, and there's many videos with her, and she says she witnessed the check going to her grandfather and went to her father by Albert Kinsey. We all want to blame Hitler for everything, right? It's always that conversation that you have with people, and it's always Hitler's the worst. Look at this guy. And we have a little cartoon for 25 cents. We can learn about the Kinsey reports. And then for the children, then he started going to campuses in the mid-40s, promoting his ideals. Well, these kids were right out of the trauma. I mean, they were ripe for picking. They loved to hear that you could have sex without marriage. It's pleasurable, after all. And then there was the cartoon factor for the children. There was always a cartoon before movies, or at least most times. But Donald Duck gave raspberries to his parents. And they started emulating how Donald Duck treated his parents. Parents thought it was cute. Disrespecting your parents became acceptable and in, but I'm sure they just grew out of it. Teens loved it. They could continue the rebellion. Parents hated it. I've seen videos where he's from Satan, or rock and roll in general. Children rebelled naturally. The 1960s came along. Kennedy was assassinated. Our innocence was gone. Prayer was taken out of schools. The pill is now accepted. Sexual revolution speeds up. If it feels good, do it, Goldie Hawn would say and laugh in. Don't trust anyone over 30. Those were just MK Ultra mind control slaves, or at least paid informants or something like that. They're paid to say that. Man landed on the moon. The globe is now confirmed.
Yeah.
Which means God is millions and trillions and billions of miles away. We don't need him. He's so far away, he's not going to hear us anyway. Evolution. This man, who is an expert in evolution, a society that condemns homosexuality, harms itself. I'd really like to know where he gets that research, because last I checked, every society that crumbles, the last thing that happens is homosexuality is normalized. So the thing with being a believer, when you believe in creation, you know that the Creator created man and woman. You also, if you have a brain, quite frankly, would realize that they'd probably die out in a generation or two. They'd be gone. But with evolution, it's great. You can make up any rule you want. And they have. I watched a TED Talk one time of a parent that their child came out, and it was hard in the beginning, but then they realized they were really lucky, because the evolutionists taught them that when you have a gay child, it's luck, like some Asian luck thing or something. Anyway, and then we have feminism. That's Jezebel. We can do it all. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember that lovely, or that wonderful commercial, I can bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan, make my man happy. You can do it all. Not true. And there's Ahab wanting the field, and I couldn't decide which picture, so I put that one into. Pretty sulky. And that's where men have been devalued, demeaned, and quite frankly, we both sexes has bought the lie. It's not one or the other. The 70s. Don't worry, I won't do everything. Because I lived it. First gay on television, All in the Family. And look, he's a very robust man with the blue shirt on there. Not your typical. Not to say, homosexuality was no longer a disorder. Why? Because they used the Kinsey reports for sex change. Switzerland, 1974. Feminism took a hold. We don't need men anymore. Roe versus Wade. We don't want to be inconvenienced by children. First gay flag flown in San Francisco. Let me tell you something. I lived this. This was not a good masculine look for the disco in the 70s. Gabardine did nothing for men. Harvey Milk. He was the first gay politician in the mid-70s in San Francisco. He was gunned down by a fellow constituent. Well, he had made a lot of progress for gays. Nothing spurs on a movement than a murder. I'm going to cover this in the 90s. After the Ball. Has anybody heard of this book, After the Ball? It's basically a how-to convince the world that gay is okay. And here's some quotes, and they're too small here, so I'm going to turn around. In conversion, the bigot, so the con is a bigot, who holds a very negative stereotype picture is repeatedly exposed to literal picture label pairs in magazines and on billboards and TV of gay explicitly labeled as such, who not only don't look like a picture of a homosexual. So see, they were purposely showing pictures that aren't necessarily the norm. And they're making them cute. I mean, Will and Grace. They're cute. It's cute. Best friend. It's all good. We mean conversion of the average American's emotions, mind, and will through a planned psychological attack in the form of propaganda fed to the nation via the media. And we should have practiced this, thank you. Advertisements can depict homophobics and homo-hating bigots as crude loudmouths and blank holes who are not Christian. It can show them being criticized, hated, shunned. It can depict gays experiencing horrific suffering as a direct result of homo-hated, suffering of which even most bigots would be ashamed to be the cause. This was all done on purpose, and what they did, and it's explained in the book, they made up this report or study to try to prove that they were born that way. At the end of the study, they said they weren't. But yet, people bought it up. I watched it. Just bought it up. And so then at the same time, coincidentally, they had programs like Will and Grace come on, et cetera, and all of a sudden, I mean, now today's commercials have gays in them, you know. And as I was doing research for Kinsey, I thought I should watch his movie, even though I knew it would be full of lies. So I went to Netflix. It wasn't on there. But this is the fallout of the Kinsey reports, right? He ended up dying of a thank you, disease from sadomasochistic masturbation. Yeah. Not to say I'm really happy that he died miserably, but kind of. So, I've been in the Flat Earth movement for over 4 years now, or the Truth movement, but especially the Flat Earth, everyone has a different theory of what a pyramid is. I liken to the one that I mirrored on my YouTube channel so you can watch it, but she basically says that is a rectum. And the one eye in there is when you have sex with an individual, maybe especially a child, it hits a certain place in the spinal cord that is attached to the pineal gland. So in their opinion, it opens up the third eye. And that's what this is all about. Freemasons are all about sodomy. It's a 17-minute video, and I highly recommend it. My YouTube channel is Emily1922, and I'll talk about that more tomorrow. And here we have the Epcot Center of Disney. Right? Exactly. This man used to be gay. His name is Joseph Skyambara. He's a really sweetheart of a man. And he has a video out, many videos in the ministry. We're off to see the wizard. And he explains why Wizard of Oz is so popular in the gay community. Basically, because there's a lot of trauma and they want to go over the rainbow. I have a more fringe view of Wizard of Oz. It is made to suppress, along with Disney movies as well, the memories of being sexually abused. It's all Illuminati, it's all witchcraft, it's all Freemasonry, the whole thing. And it was used on me. That was the movie that they used on me to suppress my memories. I had to be Dorothy with my friends. This one friend, we played Wizard of Oz, and she had to be every other character, poor thing. I always had to be Dorothy. Yeah. This one, when I woke up in about 2005, Disney and Wizard of Oz just slayed me. I went in the fetal position. I won't play the video, but it's a really nice one. And he explains, though, he loved it when he went to San Francisco in the beginning when he was a young lad. I'm not sure how old, and he would find older men to pick up on him. He would feel like his dad finally loved him. And then one day he realized he was the older man picking up younger boys, and it convicted him to come out of it. And how many of you know that symbols talk to us? They talk to each other with symbols, right? So here is a museum in Edmonton on gender sexual diversity. And we have that lovely pink symbol, which is boy love and all the other wonderful symbols that Pizzagate promotes. I got into it with a guy at the San Diego airport. When I said something about Pizzagate, they started laughing at me, mocking me, him and his friend. It was not pleasant. I said, he was showing me reports on his laptop. I said, those are just words. Go look at pictures. Go look at pictures. Anyway, in my opinion, it's still linked to child sacrifice and pedophilia, still pushed on us by the elite, proving that homosexuality is still linked to Moloch. They're just Moloch worshipers. And this is in Joel 3:3, one of those Bible verses we just skim by. They cast lots for my people. They bartered a boy for a prostitute and sold a girl for a wine to drink.
Yeah.
What's going on today? Come on.
It's interesting that the ending of Toy Story 3 has the toys accepting their fate of fiery destruction, but are then redeemed by 3 alien saviors. That's a whole different topic in itself, and we're working on covering that in our upcoming Alien and UFO documentary, so be on the lookout for that. But the newest teaser for Toy Story 4 caught our attention when they appear to be dancing in a circle in the clouds of heaven as a new character enters the screen and screams in panic saying, "I don't belong here!" People are asking the question, why does Forky feel that he doesn't belong in what appears to be heaven? I couldn't help but notice that Forky is actually not a fork, but a spork, which is neither a fork or a spoon, but a combination of both. You might say Forky is utensil fluid. You may think we are reaching here, but coincidentally, Forky has a rainbow sticker on his left foot, which just happens to be the official colors that represent the LGBT community. Also, the spork itself is iconic in the trans community, as well as the name of a movie about a 14-year-old hermaphrodite girl who's trying to find where she fits in.
I'm a 14-year-old girl. Or actually a hybrid. Girl and boy.
And as Hollywood loves to do, shows a Christian group rejecting her.
What's your name, sweetie?
Or
That's an interesting name. Why do they call you that? I really don't think someone like you would make a very good addition to God's army of goodness.
Just like the book after the ball. They're going to make us look like horrible, hateful people.
I think that anyone can do what they want in life. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. If you want to be a drag queen and your parents don't let you, you need new parents. Are you familiar with the drag queen Lactatia?
No, but I would love to find out who she is.
Yeah, I'm an 8-year-old drag queen. Get it right?
Are you Lactatia?
I just told you that.
Oh my goodness, she's that big too! Okay.
If you want to be a drag queen and your friends don't let you, you need new friends.
Adorable, Latasia. Is this your first time to drag? Not really. Latasia, I was you as a child. Latasia, I absolutely adore you, and this is brilliant, and I love the fact that you're here. What I love most about this is that your mom is here with you, supporting you. Is that
We've come so far, haven't we? We should be so proud of ourselves. I'm going to end it here for today. I hope you come back to see the rest. As you can see, though, we've all had a part in this. We've all gone to Disney movies. We've all thought this was okay. And we're here now. And what do? Lots of repenting, quite frankly. Lots of repenting. Face plants is what I call them, because I've done them. Anyway, so enjoy your lunch. And
Well, quick question. So you say that it is okay to hate Adam and Eve?
I'm sorry, I'm really
Are
not.
you saying it okay?
Is Satan okay?
To hate Adam and Eve?
Is Satan,
Is it okay to hate Adam?
right, no. Right? I mean, why would we,
Why would you not hate Adam and Eve? I mean, but that's okay if
You know,
do hate Adam and Eve. I respect that. But God created that.
You know, I apologize. I'm usually not set up for questions because
Okay.
I don't want to get into too much. If people ask me afterwards, that's great. But if I'm really not set up because this is really difficult for me to do. I've just poured out my soul.
Right.
And so when people start coming at me, I'm not really sure where they're coming from. And so if we can table this conversation, I'd really appreciate it.
But I just understand that you hate Adam. and
I'm not
Eve.
really understanding the question. So